Okay, step 3 of the name and explain chart is to highlight or underline the words or groups of words that you believe contain important ideas and explain why they're important. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to choose some words to go along with some ideas that stuck out to me as I read the poem. The important thing is that you're highlighting or underlining things that you think are important. What you pick out as important might not be the same thing that somebody else picks out. Like I'm only going to talk about 2 important ideas. There are probably more than 2 important ideas in this poem. And what I choose might not be the same thing that your teacher chooses, and what your teacher chooses might not be the same thing that you choose. The important thing is if you can back it up with something that's in the text, then it's an okay thing to write about, okay? So you choose what sticks out to you. I'm going to show you what stuck out to me. So the first idea that I want to go over with y'all is I saw a lot that reminded me of togetherness. So I'm going to go through the poem and show you and highlight the things that reminded me of togetherness. Okay. So one of the first things I saw that reminded me of togetherness, and I mean like family kind of togetherness, is he talks about the 5 hungry kids and the fact that the mother's making them all lunch, and that's a really nice family together kind of thing. And I can tell you as a parent, I have only 2 kids and they're hungry, and it's a lot of work to make even 2 kids lunch. So that the mom is making these kids lunch every day and the husband, that's a lot of work, and she's showing a lot of love to the family and they're together. Another thing that reminded me of family togetherness was where he says, we were sparrows and starlings. And remember when I looked up starlings in the dictionary, it said they were birds that stick together. So I felt like that was kind of going along with that idea of families togetherness. He's talking about these particular birds, and the kind of bird he's talking about are birds that stick together. So that's all about that family togetherness. Another family togetherness piece that I saw was he's talking about the 64 singles wrapped in wax, and you have to dig your nails in to separate them. And he's associating his family with this American cheese, and his family memories go back with this American cheese, and the American cheese sticks together. It's hard to tear the American cheese apart, just like it's hard to tear his family apart. So those are the things that reminded me or made me think of family togetherness. Okay, so the other thing that made me, that really stuck out to me is economic status seems to be important in this poem. So economic status meaning how much money somebody has. So a couple things stand out to me. One, the author starts off by talking about department parties and cheese that the parents never heard of, those gooey, pale cheeses speaking garbled tongues. And I'm thinking, that sounds like fancy cheese to me. And the kind of work that has parties with fancy cheese is a fancy kind of work. So this person, the narrator of the poem, the speaker in the poem, is probably going to, he probably has some kind of fancy job where he makes a lot of money. So that reminded me of economic status. And he says, I've acquired a taste. And that's a phrase that people usually say about, they'll say like, oh, I've acquired a taste for the finer things in life. So it's a fancy way of saying you've grown to like something. So that has some economic status tied to it. So then there's a contrast because he says, I grew up in a house shaded by the factory's clank and clamor. And if the house is right next to the factory, that's not a fancy area of town. If you go to Houston and you go to like the Galleria or River Oaks, you don't see any factories around there. It's all just millionaire houses, right? And they're crazy. That's where like George Bush lives. Millionaires, oil money. And so he's talking about a house right next to a factory, and so that's generally not where you're going to find people with like super rich. They don't live next to a factory. The rich people live up in River Oaks. So, and he says the house is built like a square of 64 American singles. It's kind of square and blockish. There's not much fancy going on with the house. So just the structure of the house is very plain. And they're eating American cheese, which is like the cheapest one. Like I know when I was in college and I was out of money, you know, you'd go to the grocery store, you could get American singles, like those Kraft singles, and that'll get you through until you get paid. So, and they're having the day old Wonder Bread. So if you're making a sandwich that has meat, that's really expensive, but they're not having meat on the sandwich, they're just having the cheese. And he says not even Swiss. And Swiss is a foreign cheese and it's more expensive than American cheese. So that kind of speaks to the economic status of the speaker. Growing up, he didn't have a lot of money. And another thing is that sparrows and starlings are really common birds. Remember in the dictionary it said that starlings were a pest, and I know sparrows are kind of thought of in the same way. They're birds, they're kind of plain birds, and they hang out, and they're not like your, you know, no one's buying a sparrow or a starling to keep in a cage at their house. They're not fancy birds, they're really plain common birds. So that speaks to economic status as well. He's comparing himself and his brothers, well, I don't know if they're brothers or sisters, but they're five of them, to something that's really plain and common and ordinary. So that all speaks to that economic status. Okay, folks, so I've identified a couple of important ideas that I saw, and now your teacher is going to spend some time with you to see if there are any important ideas that you saw or your teacher saw that you want to explore. And I included a couple pictures here, one of American cheese in case you've never seen it. And if you have never had it, you should definitely try it because it is delicious. And this is a picture of a neighborhood in Cleveland where the houses are right near the factory, just to give you a visual of what the author might be talking about in the poem.